Zhou Shuyu, who died in the 10th year of the apocalypse, was reborn back to the distant and familiar 1970s. Since the heavens have bestowed such a great fortune, she naturally wants to take her precious space and walk at the forefront of this era, becoming a proud and prosperous generation. What? Did the kind-hearted big shot she rarely saved come to find her? Do you still want to date her? Boss, please don't avenge her and delay her earning speed. Lin Xiaoheng. I am wealthy and powerful, and you can support me in anything you do. Zhou Shuyu. No need, she can handle it herself. Lin Xiaoheng. My waist is good, my kidney is good, and I am obedient. Zhou Shuyu touched his chin and looked at the handsome man in the sky. After thinking about it, I don't think it's not impossible. After all, men are easy to meet, and the best products are hard to find. It's unreasonable to give others a discount. Chapter 1. The big brother of the original owner who was pressed to the ground and beat up. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Mom, if you really don't want Shuyu to marry Li Gu, don't blame me for not recognizing you. A furious low roar pierced through the stuffy air and woke the girl sleeping in bed. She suddenly sat up from the bed. Thin sweat moistened the hair in front of his forehead and pressed it against his flushed cheeks. Even if she is tightly stretched, it does not affect her brightness and beauty in the slightest. What is this place? Didn't she die in a zombie swarm? Zhou Shuyu frowned and quickly scanned the environment with a cold and guarded gaze. In the bedroom, which is less than 10 square meters, there is a single bed, a desk, a bedside table, and a small wardrobe. Although clean and tidy, they are all very simple old-fashioned furniture. The floor under my feet is bare cement, making this room look even more shabby. Zhou Shuyu furrowed his delicate eyebrows and eyes, and his gaze finally fell on the calendar bound to the wall. September 1974. How could she go back 60 years ago? Before Zhou Shuyu could figure it out, another headache-inducing noise came from outside. What's wrong with Shuyu marrying Li Gu? Although Li Gu is a second marriage and a bit older, he is a chef in a state-owned restaurant and earns a higher salary than his father. As long as Shuyu gives birth to a son for him, everything will be hers. How much effort did my mother and uncle put into telling her about this good marriage? Why are you so foolish? Zhou Wenbo's irritable low growl. Su Qingya's pupils shrank in shock and looked at her eldest son in disbelief. Shuyu is your sister. How could you point to a fire pit like everyone else and say it's a lucky nest? It's precisely because I'm her brother that I want her to marry someone with good conditions, instead of picking around and picking up things that I can't handle. She's not in good health and doesn't have a job, so what if she's a high school student? We still lack high school students in our city. Zhou Wenbo's voice was icy and piercing, and his words were extremely harsh. Su Qingya gritted her teeth and made a desperate decision. Then let Shuyu take over your father's position. She has a formal job and can afford to eat commodity food, so there will naturally be many people who want to marry her. Your father will not want Shuyu to marry that Li Weiqing until he dies. I cannot go against his will. Upon hearing these words, Zhou Wenbo's expression immediately turned sinister and ferocious. What should I do? I'm already 20 years old and I don't have a job yet. How can I get married and have children? Do you still want to have grandchildren? Anyway, if you give her your father's job, I won't recognize you as a mother. Who's holding a grandson? My mother, or your own mother? Didn't you just say, don't you recognize my mother? The clear and pleasant sound echoed behind them like the babbling water in the mountains. The two people in the argument were startled. Turn around and look at the lazy little girl leaning against the door. The girl's fried dough twists braid, though loose, is as smooth as silk, which makes people want to touch it. Shuyu, why are you up? Did we disturb you? Su Qingya quickly wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes, walked over to her, and asked with concern. Zhou Shuyu pursed her rosy lips and raised her eyebrows. Someone wants to grab something from me, but they can't come out. Just now, amidst this commotion, she finally sorted out everything that's happening now. Her current situation should be called time travel. And not only did I have the opportunity to live another life, but I also returned to this good era where pigs can breathe and even ascend to heaven. If we don't work hard to become a wealthy generation, it will be in vain. Zhou Wenbo gritted his teeth and glared fiercely at Zhou Shuyu, as if he was about to eat her. What's robbing you? You're a daughter, you're going to marry someone else's house. I'm the head of the family, my son. Dad passed away, his job should be mine. Which law stipulates that everything in the house must be given to your son? How much meat do you have on your body? Believe it or not, I'll cut it for you. Zhou Shuyu lazily met his gaze, with a beautiful and mischievous smile on her rosy lips. Zhou Wenbo didn't expect her to dare to speak to him like this, and he suddenly became furious. Zhou Shuyu, I'm your big brother. If you have any problems in the future, you'll have to rely on me to lead you. Just you. Hee hee. Zhou Shuyu seemed to have heard some big joke. As the leader of my family, when it's time to go to the countryside, I'm afraid of suffering and refuse to respond to calls to support rural construction. In the end, I force my 16-year-old brother to go to the countryside. If I expect you to be such a waste, why don't we just die now? I am the eldest in my family, and I have to take care of my family. How can I go to the countryside? Anyway, you will have to marry into someone else's family in the future. Why can't you sacrifice for your own family first? Besides, if it weren't for your affectation, would Xu Yang have gone to the countryside? Zhou Wenbo confidently refuted. They originally wanted Zhou Shuyu to replace him and go to the countryside. After all, if Zhou Shuyang is not favored, at least he is also a grandson. If he wants to sacrifice himself, he must be sacrificing his granddaughter. As a result, Zhou Shuyu, a dead girl, relied on her premature birth and poor health when she was a child, crying and making noise at home. Zhou Shuyang felt sorry for her being a sister, so he secretly went to register. But in fact, Zhou Shuyu's body has long been well taken care of, but he is a person who is accustomed to putting on airs. It is only because of this family of fools being played around by her that she has all kinds of biases towards her. Zhou Shuyu looked at Zhou Wenbo's increasingly contemptuous gaze and also received the memories of the original owner. Naturally, he was more aware of the petty details in the original owner's heart than anyone else, and was too lazy to listen to any comments that favored men over women. Since she is at fault in this matter, let's not be unreasonable. Thinking this way, Zhou Shuyu rushed to Zhou Wenbo in 3 steps and 2 steps, then kicked him in the stomach. Before he could fly out, he exerted a downward force on his toes and then stepped on the concrete ground. Lest beating this white-eyed wolf make their already poor life worse. Zhou Wenbo let out a pitiful scream like killing a pig, but he still wanted to curse in frustration. Zhou Shuyu didn't even wait for him to speak, so he bent down and slapped him in the face, making a popping sound. In no time, Zhou Wenbo's face turned red and swollen, like a pig's head. Su Qingya, who had reacted, moved, but was hit with a cold knife by Zhou Shuyu. The chilling chill made Su Qingya silently kick back. Forget it, who made Zhou Wenbo angry with Shuyu. Just hit him, anyway, he has thick skin and thick flesh. You can't let your own girlishness go out for the sake of an adopted son who eats inside out. You. Dare you hit me? You've turned the tables. After finally catching his breath, Zhou Wenbo trembled and covered his face, unable to believe his anger. Pop pop pop. In response, he slapped him repeatedly, and blood flowed down the corner of his mouth. Chapter 2. Encountering a dying big shot. You are listening at novelfull.audio. I hit you, the white-eyed wolf. When Grandma sent you to our house, she asked you to sacrifice for us. You're so lucky, you really treat yourself as a treasure. I haven't been in contact with my aunt, your biological mother, for so many years. Did you make such a fuss today? Was it my milk stirring it up, or was it your own mother? Or is it all the people of Lao Zhou's family? Zhou Shuyu's aggressive questioning. Zhou Wenbo was both angry and anxious, his eyes turning crimson and ferocious. Enough. You killed Dad, you don't even know it's wrong. Isn't it your good grandmother and biological mother who, without my parents' consent, secretly accepted other people's dowries and forced me to marry Li Weiqing that killed my father? Zhou Shuyu's mouth curved upwards with a mocking curve, and he looked back at Zhou Wenbo with a straight hook. The original owner was so angry that when she heard her grandmother say she wanted to marry her to a second married old man, she cried and made a fuss, and even ran to jump into the river in search of life and death. After being rescued, he developed a high fever, causing palpitations, and finally killed himself. And her father was also hit by a slippery truck and passed away when he went to the Li family to divorce at noon yesterday. Now that she has taken over the body of the original owner and has the opportunity to live a lifetime, it is even more impossible for her to marry that man. As for being involved in this matter and infuriating the Zhou family, she will not let go of any of them. Zhou Wenbo stared fixedly at Zhou Shuyu, but there was nothing he could do about her. Struggling to get up, trying to find his milk and discuss with his mother. In the past, remember to tell them to return the 200 yuan that my uncle had exchanged for my brother from his factory director as soon as possible. Zhou Shuyu raised his chin and reminded. Where did you hear that nonsense? When did they do such a thing? Zhou Wenbo's already unattractive face is now somewhat distorted. That family has long boasted to everyone, do you really think our family is stupid enough to know nothing? Zhou Shuyu hugged his chest with both hands, and the curved corners of his mouth were full of malicious ridicule. At that time, the wealthy Zhou family replaced Xu Yang, who was supposed to go to the countryside in Jiangbei, with the northeast where the director's daughter should go, in order to make money and please the director in the uncle's factory. In fact, the brigade in northeast China is definitely a good place for those who have good family conditions and can provide subsidies for their children. But the downside is that there are not many people who can become wealthy enough to provide subsidies for their children these days. Their family only has one salary. Previously, they not only had to support a family of 5, but also had to give their grandmother a monthly pension of 5 yuan, which is even more unacceptable. On such a cold day, with 4 months of less farm work, Zhou Shuyang is afraid that he will really starve to death or freeze to death. Thinking of this, Zhou Shuyu's dark deep pupils became even colder and more dangerous. Zhou Wenbo's body trembled with fear when he saw that she knew everything. Get out of here. Remember not only to return the money, but also to compensate for the losses. Otherwise, don't blame me for causing trouble in your father's factory. Don't say that the money can't be kept, don't even try to keep his job as the factory director. Zhou Shuyu urged impatiently. Zhou Wenbo dared not say anything more to her and ran away with his tail between his legs. Su Qingya looked at his hurried back with a complex expression, and it took her a while to retract her gaze. She looked at Zhou Shuyu's pale face with heartache and nervously said, Did you not take your medicine? Did your fever subside? I've finished the medicine, I'll go to the hospital to prescribe some later. Zhou Shuyu shook her head. You're still burning here, let me go and rest at home. I may still have a low fever, but I happen to go to the hospital and ask the doctor to take a look for me. Zhou Shuyu needs to hurry to the road now and block the Zhou family and beat them up. Otherwise, the 7 or 8 of them would come knocking on her door and argue, which would be a waste of her saliva. And the original owner has been pretending that his premature body has not been properly taken care of in order to be favored by his family. She doesn't want to expose her true nature right away, so she will definitely be suspected. Fortunately, Su Qingya has a soft temper and favors such a girl. She has been causing a lot of trouble these days, and her emotions have rarely calmed down, so she dare not say anything more. Take the money for prescribing the medicine. She took out 2 yuan from her pocket and stuffed it into Zhou Shuyu's hand. Zhou Shuyu instinctively wanted to refuse. Although her pocket was indeed cleaner than her face, her personal space in the apocalypse also came with her. Even though most places are locked, some food and small items that can be exchanged for money in this era can still be freely accessed. But looking at the worried expression of the original owner's mother, she still managed to take the money. After leaving the family area of the factory, it was confirmed that no one had seen it. Zhou Shuyu suddenly rushed into an alley and ran at full speed towards the east of the city. Shuttled through deserted alleys and walls all the way. The journey to her uncle's house, which originally required walking for 40 minutes, was shortened to just over 10 minutes. As soon as she arrived at the alley outside her uncle's house, she heard several familiar voices cursing and cursing. This Zhou Shuyu is really rebellious. How dare you take action against your big brother? Look, I won't kill her today. Ah, indeed this family is not a good thing. Zhou Shuyu took out a picnic mat the size of a bed sheet and a 5-meter-long hemp rope from his personal space. After climbing the tree, throw the mat down and cover those few people inside. Jumping down from the tree again, I wrapped it a few times with hemp rope. Make sure they won't crawl out, take out a baseball bat from the space and give them a fierce beating. A scream rang out for a moment, and the alley became like a human purgatory. Zhou Shuyu played for 10 minutes and knocked them all unconscious before hearing footsteps coming. Quickly packing everything into the space, she crossed the side wall and left. After running at full speed for 7 minutes again, Zhou Shuyu finally arrived at the hospital. After pretending to have the doctor examine her, she decided to leave after confirming her physical condition. But as a result, I heard noisy shouts coming from the entrance of the courtyard. Make way. Please make way. Please make way for the comrades in front of you. You're in a hurry to save your life. Several officials wearing 4 pockets, surrounded by a stretcher, rushed into the hospital with pale and anxious faces. Doctors and nurses were left far behind by them. TSK, it seems like a big shot. Zhou Shuyu was afraid of being hit by them and leaned sideways against the wall. A stretcher cart passed by her side. Through the gaps between people, she saw the patient lying on top. The man's body is covered with bright red blood. My face also turned pale and purple due to excessive blood loss. Such a person obviously has no chance of being saved. Chapter 3, Please ask her to save the benefactor. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Shuyu's gaze shifted upwards again and placed it on his face. The dim lights in the hallway poured down, creating a halo on his face. The facial contours are as sharp as a knife, like a beloved child carefully carved by God. His eyelashes, as long as black feathers, trembled lightly and weakly covered his eyes. The bridge of the nose is quite broad and straight, and the cold and thin lips are almost on par with the whiteness of the face. Not to mention the apocalyptic decade, which was the peak of the entertainment industry, she had never seen such a handsome man before. Alas, it's really a pity. A handsome guy, he's going to die so young. Zhou Shuyu sighed a bit. Watching the stretcher cart pushed away, she casually withdrew her gaze. I wanted to leave, but suddenly felt a little uncomfortable in my stomach. I asked the nurse next to me about the location of the restroom, and when I went there, it was filled with people. Zhou Shuyu and others were bored and could only continue to check the things in their personal warehouse. The previous incident left her with no time to take a closer look at how much her space had changed. This space was obtained by chance in the apocalypse. It's not that big either, it's only 1,000 cubic meters in general. Inside, there are 10 boxes of cookies, 10 boxes of milk powder, dozens of boxes of water, as well as thousands of bags of rice and dozens of sets of clothes for all seasons. Soap, shower gel, shampoo, and skincare products are also placed in boxes. Eggs and meat are packed in plastic boxes, labeled, and stacked together. Because she didn't follow the main army in the apocalypse, her weapons were mostly close and practical. There is also a large Chinese medicine cabinet in the corner, which contains many Chinese and Western medicines. There are even medical equipment such as silver needles and surgical knives. Although she has healing abilities, it is too exhausting to use and can easily lead to self-rescue when in danger. So when encountering general problems, she uses ordinary treatment methods. Only when oneself is serious, will one use some special abilities. But now these things are divided into blocks by a layer of pale golden light. Except for the nearest grid which is open, all other golden masks are covered with a red paper. There are 4 big characters written on it. Check in to unlock. Zhou Shuyu was curious about what she needed to check in on this thing, so she tore off the most valuable piece from the traditional Chinese medicine cabinet. After the red paper, it was written that she needed to go to the northeast to unlock it, but there were no other requirements. That is to say, she only needs people to go to northeast China, even if she gets off the train and immediately gets on the train and comes back, even if she successfully checks in, there is no need to deliberately go find the original owner's brother. That task is not difficult at all. However, the original owner's father has not even passed the first 7, so it will definitely take some time to unlock it. Zhou Shuyu originally wanted to see if there were any simpler check-in tasks. The remaining red paper couldn't be torn off at all. Obviously, she needs to complete the previous check-in task before unlocking the next one. Fortunately, there are small red text reminders in the space, which were originally only used for freshness and storage, but now have an additional circulation function. After taking out the supplies she brought from the apocalypse, they will return to their original quantity in 24 hours. But if things from this world are put in, then taken out and used, there won't be such a good thing anymore. But that's already good, there are many good things in the cube closest to her. Doctor, you can't give up. Do you know how important Mr. Lin is to us? You have to save him. You must save him. At the far end of the corridor, outside the operating room, suddenly came several men's painful pleadings. Many people looked over curiously. Zhou Shuyu felt that it was too noisy and got up to leave. But the painful cries of those men forcefully held her back as she left. These are all soldiers who can sacrifice their lives for ordinary people. Even in the 10 years of the apocalypse, even if all order collapses, these soldiers will continue to search and rescue time and time again, sacrificing their lives for ordinary people. And she was also rescued from despair several times due to their selfless sacrifice. Forget it, let's just repay the kindness they once saved us. Zhou Shuyu sighed helplessly. Turning around, I turned directly into the unmanned nurse station. She casually found a nurse uniform to put on her body, then took out cosmetics and skin wax and quickly disguised herself. I followed the crowd and squeezed together. Ordinary people were stopped at the outermost, and after the person wearing hospital work clothes entered the corner, someone stood there to verify their identity. Zhou Shuyu reported the name she had just seen on the duty roster, and only after the other party wrote down their name did she lift the hair hanging from her ear behind her. A faint fragrance struck, and the 2 guards lost their minds, quickly regaining their clarity. There are still 4 guards standing at the entrance of the operating room. Zhou Shuyu used the same method to captivate them, which led to his successful entry. But when she pushed the door open, there were still several people wearing green uniforms standing inside. Obviously, their status is higher. These people immediately looked over on guard when they heard the noise. The ice needle in Zhou Shuyu's hand quickly flew towards them. The speed was too fast, and the weapons were too small. They didn't even see Zhou Shuyu's face clearly, so they all fainted to the ground. Zhou Shuyu frowned solemnly. With so many people protecting an injured person, and several people wearing stars on their shoulders in this room, it is obvious that they are not simple leaders. So what is the current identity of this man that makes him so valued? Without time to think carefully, she quickly walked to the surgical bed. My gaze fell on the man's sturdy chest, and then I saw a burst of blood on his gray-blue suit. The wound was still oozing with blood. Zhou Shuyu reached out and wiped some of the man's blood, then added a simple cover to his already disguised face, which was considered double safety. Looking up, I saw the man lying on the hospital bed, who opened his eyes at some point. Sharp as a falcon's eyes flickered with piercing coldness, it was hard to tell that he was someone whose life was about to come to an end. This made Zhou Shuyu's heart immediately rise to his throat. Can this man see her appearance clearly? Should she just shut up for the sake of her future stability? In Zhou Shuyu's slightly narrowed eyes, a hint of killing intent flashed, but soon it was hidden again. Who are you? Lin Xiaoheng forced his breath and asked in a hoarse voice. The person who saved you. Zhou Shuyu coughed lightly and deliberately lowered his volume. But obviously the other party didn't believe it, and their cold eyes were still locked tightly on her. Chapter 4. What grandma? It's just a father slaying enemy. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. He is very clear about where he was injured. On the way here, the accompanying doctor had already said that he might not even be able to get off the operating table this time. He didn't feel anything about it, it's just a pity that his research was only halfway there. Others may find it even harder to take over. Okay, I know you don't believe it, but when you wake up from sleep, you'll know I'm not lying to you. Zhou Shuyu didn't have time to explain much, so he reached out and forcefully pinched the man's back neck. Lin Xiaoheng's dark, ink-like eyes froze in an instant, and then completely lost consciousness. Zhou Shuyu took out medicine and a surgical knife from the space and placed them aside, then gently pressed his hand against the wound on his heart. Feeling that the supernatural energy in his body was slowly dissipating, and the blood from the wound had also stopped, Zhou Shuyu finally withdrew his hand. Picking up the surgical knife and forceps, she quickly removed the object stuck on the heart lobe. And just before the blood splattered out, Zhou Shuyu's hand covered it again, and the cracked blood vessels healed instantly. The remaining wounds can no longer be treated with supernatural powers. Not only because of her current energy and efficacy, she doesn't even have 1/10 of what she used to have. Moreover, it is because the wounds that have exploded outside are treated with supernatural powers and have recovered too well. This abnormal phenomenon that goes beyond natural healing will definitely be investigated. However, in order not to destroy the beauty of this robust chest and prevent the man's wife from disliking him in the future, Zhou Shuyu sewed it up very carefully. It didn't take 10 minutes to save my life, but it took almost 20 minutes to sew a wound. Embroidered beautifully, with only a tiny scar. Wash off the blood stains on your hands and then wash off the fresh blood on your face. Zhou Shuyu pursed her lips and stared fixedly at Lin Xiaoheng lying on the operating table for a while, before finally leaving without any merit or fame. Anyway, after suffering such a serious injury and bleeding so much, my vision has long been blurred. Moreover, when he wiped the blood, he was still unconscious and definitely couldn't see her appearance clearly. To take a step back, even if the man has a particularly good brain, he can still remember her at a glance. But it's not that she underestimates herself, just like an ordinary person like her, she will never have the opportunity to come into contact with such a big shot again in her life. She hurried home all the way, only to reach the outside of the family courtyard when she heard noise coming from inside. Shuyu, you've come back. Your grandmother has been here for more than 10 minutes. Hurry up and go in, otherwise your mother will be bullied to death by your milk. The old neighbor who was standing in the hallway and watching, turned around and saw Zhou Shuyu, and immediately said urgently. Oh, she hasn't bothered this old thing yet, but she took the initiative to jump out. Zhou Shuyu laughed coldly in his heart. On the face, he obediently thanked the old neighbors before pushing open the closed door. You broom, you still know you're coming back. The old woman with white hair choked her throat and cursed angrily. That sharp voice almost tore through Zhou Shuyu's eardrums. TSK. This is the original owner's grandmother, it really fits her previous imagination. Sharp and harsh. What are you doing here? Zhou Shuyu asked lazily. When his gaze fell on Su Qingya, who had been hit with a bruised nose and swollen face, he immediately became gloomy and sharp. Her father had a falling out with the family and insisted on marrying his mother who had escaped from famine, which was why he was despised by his grandparents. Both the original owner and her brother were not liked. After all, no mother likes it. My son goes against himself for the sake of a woman. Moreover, only by marrying a girl who also eats commodity food and has a double salary can one generously show more filial piety to their parents. Maybe it can also help the boss's family. He married his mother who had escaped from famine and raised a large family with just one salary, but none of the three families had a good life. It is understandable that the original owner's grandparents harbored resentment. But what does this have to do with her? She is Zhou Shuyu 60 years later, not from this old Zhou family. I'm your nurse, this is my son's house, I can't come yet. Mrs. Hu scolded in a wicked tone. Do you also deserve to mention my dad? If you hadn't been open-minded and carried my parents on your back for 500 yuan, promising me a second-hand pair of old shoes, my dad would have been killed by a car. If you would listen to my dad and return the secretly collected dowry money to the Li family, my mom wouldn't lose her husband, and Shuyang and I wouldn't lose our dad. So what kind of grandmother are you? You're just my father's murderer, Zhou Shuyu sarcastically satirized. Mrs. Wang was taken aback for a moment and then rushed towards her in anger. Okay, you damn girl, how dare you talk to me like that? Excuse me. Zhou Shuyu frowned and didn't even touch a corner of his clothes, so he grabbed her collar and dragged her out. You let go of me. You bereaved star. I am your own grandmother. Mrs. Hu screamed in shock. But Zhou Shuyu was too lazy to bother with her. As soon as the door opened, it threw the person directly into the corridor. The commotion startled the old neighbors outside, and they immediately heard Zhou Shuyu threatening fiercely. Get lost. Don't come back to my house again in the future. Otherwise, I'll see you once and hit you once. What a sin. How could we have such a bereaved star in our family, who killed my son and her biological father, and now he's taking action against my biological grandmother? Mrs. Hu didn't even get up and lay on the ground, crying loudly. The old neighbors who were watching from the side were all standing on the side of Zhou Shuyu's mother and daughter. Hu Lao Tai, we have always known that you are biased, but you are not a good person. How could you force your own son to death? Exactly. You sold your granddaughter and forced your son to death. Now that his son has not even passed the 7th grade and has not yet been buried, he has come to bully the orphan and widowed mother. What a sin. They began to criticize Mrs. Wang one by one. I didn't do it. It's not me who caused it. It's Zhou Shuyu, this dead girl. If she had married her honestly, my son wouldn't have died. Old Madam Hu was sprayed with blood on her face and shook her head desperately. Why do I have to marry? Now that marriage is free, if you take someone else's dowry behind my back, behind my parents' back, and force me to marry, then you are a human trafficker and a violation of marriage law. A bad old lady like you who commits multiple crimes should be punished by the law and imprisoned for at least 20.30 years. As Zhou Shuyu spoke, he reached out to grab old lady Hu again. No. Don't touch me. I'm not going to the police station. Get out of here. Mrs. Hu screamed frantically and waved her hand desperately to prevent Zhou Shuyu from approaching. She just likes to be domineering, not foolish. Zhou Shuyu said he wanted to send her to the police station and accused her of breaking the law, but that was not a joke. If you really care, she will definitely go to jail. Chapter 5. Sending my grandmother to prison for food. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Shuyu was caught several times, but was blocked by Madame Hu. Several bloodstains were also scratched on her arm, which completely drained her patience. Pop. A heavy slap hit Mrs. Wang's waving arm. You killed my dad, really thought you could just forget about it. Mrs. Wang felt so painful that her hands seemed to be about to break, and she dared not take any more action. She could only seek help from the neighbors who were watching. But everyone looked at her with contempt and disdain in their eyes. "Mrs. Hu, come on. This is your daughter-in-law's house, so if you want to leave, you have to leave." The surrounding neighbors mocked and mocked. "No. I'm here because Zhou Shuyu attacked the elders. I just beat them all to the point where they can't get up in bed," Mrs. Wang explained anxiously. "Mom, how can you talk nonsense? What kind of body is Shuyu at home? How could she possibly beat up the whole family?" Su Qingya retorted in surprise. "Can I still wrongly accuse her? We haven't blushed with anyone in the past 1 or 2 years. Apart from the loser you gave birth to, who could have dealt such a harsh blow?" Mrs. Hu glared fiercely at Su Qingya and her daughter with a fierce expression. "If you really think it's me who did it, go report it to the police. Anyway, I just went to the hospital and there are personal and physical evidence, and the time doesn't match." Zhou Shuyu tilted his head, looking quite innocent, but his tone was full of sarcasm. "Anyway, now there is no eye for the sky, and the time of her arrival and departure doesn't match. The public security doesn't even suspect her. Reporting to the police is very honorable, isn't it? Do you still treat us as your elders?" Hu Lao was so anxious that he jumped again. "Now in my eyes, you are not as good as animals. I believe that after Zhou Wenbo went over, he must have told you everything. If you're smarter, hurry up and return the money from the Li family, and then hand over the money my younger brother exchanged for going to the countryside. Otherwise, your precious eldest son will be fired by the factory." Zhou Shuyu hooked her rosy lips and smiled wickedly. "How dare you?" Mrs. Wang's eyes widened into 2 copper bells. Zhou Shuyu was too lazy to talk nonsense to her and turned around to enter the room. After a while, he walked back with a hemp rope the size of a thumb. Ah! Oh my God! Help me! I'm dying!" Mrs. Hu trembled with fear and cried at the top of her throat. But there's still no one nearby to help. Mrs. Hu could only turn her pleading gaze towards Zhou Wenbo. "My dear grandson, come and save grandma." But Zhou Wenbo dared not oppose Zhou Shuyu, so he could only suppress his fear and say, "Milk, why don't you just listen to Shuyu's words?" Mrs. Hu saw that her grandson couldn't be relied on, so she had no choice but to look at Su Qingya standing on the side. The woman hung her head and tightly grasped the hem with both hands, but still walked over. Just as old lady Hu was feeling proud, Su Qingya and Zhou Shuyu grabbed the tied hemp rope of old lady Hu and dragged it out. "Su Qingya, you slut! I'm your mother-in-law, how dare you treat me like this? Are you not afraid of thunder and lightning?" Mrs. Hu cursed in a sharp voice. Zhou Shuyu felt annoyed and took a cloth and stuffed it into her mouth. They lived not far from the police station, and it only took them about 10 minutes to drag and drop along the way. At the police station, Zhou Shuyu threw Mrs. Hu into the hall. "We need to report the case," she shouted loudly, and the police inside quickly walked over. "What did this old lady do?" "She took 500 yuan from a second married man and tried to forcibly drag me over without my parents' consent. This not only violated the marriage freedom advocated by the leader, but also committed a serious crime of human trafficking." Zhou Shuyu talked about their family's troubles like pouring beans out of a bamboo tube. The more the police listen, the uglier their face becomes. After calming down, they looked back at Zhou Shuyu and Su Qingya and said, "So are you sure you want to sue her now?" "Sure. And I also want to sue her to challenge my daughter-in-law. See what she did to my mother when she rushed to my house." Zhou Shuyu pointed to Su Qingya's painted face. "Okay, let's lock her up first and conduct a thorough investigation. If the situation is true, we'll have to wait a few days to know how to sentence her." The police recorded the case before giving Zhou Shuyu a rough estimate of the time. "Thank you, Comrade Public Security. Zhou Shuyu bowed to several public security officers. Su Qingya also quickly followed. The police on one side pulled out the cloth from Mrs. Hu's mouth, and before they could ask about the situation, she began to argue incessantly. "Comrade Public Security, I don't have one. I just want to find a good family for my granddaughter. Although that person is remarried and has 2 daughters, they have a good job. I was thinking that if my granddaughter gets married, she will definitely be able to live a good life. I am looking for a good family for her, not selling her for money. And her father is my own son, how could I have deliberately harmed him by sending someone with white hair to someone with black hair? I am wronged, I am truly wronged," she cried with a runny nose and tears, trying to arouse sympathy from the police. But when she makes mistakes like this, she is bold and confident, and when things are exposed, she stands firm and resolute. There are too many people who will only live or die until they are caught and held legally responsible. The public security has long been accustomed to it. You agreed to this marriage without going through Comrade Zhou's parents, let alone Comrade Zhou, and even embezzled a huge sum of 500 yuan. Now that you're getting married in the city, the dowry is only about 100 yuan. If you accept 500 yuan and keep it for yourself, it's clear what kind of behavior you're taking." Hu Laotai saw that sophistry was useless, and immediately rushed to Zhou Shuyu's lap with a rolling motion. "Good grandson, Grandma knows she's wrong. It's my fault for thinking wrong. I'm sorry for you all. But I'm so old, if I were really locked up, I wouldn't be able to live for 2 days. Please forgive Grandma this time. When I go back, I will give you all the dowry money. We'll handle our family affairs ourselves and don't cause any trouble for the police." Comrade, she begged desperately and hugged Zhou Shuyu's leg, crying bitterly. Zhou Shuyu was not used to being restrained like this and forcefully pulled out his leg. Mrs. Hu could only place her hope for help on Su Qingya again. Before she could pounce, Zhou Shuyu had already pulled the person behind her. The police, who had reacted, quickly controlled Mrs. Hu. She wanted to make a scene, but was dragged back to the detention room inside. Chapter 6. The Mischievous Zhou Family. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Zhou Shuyu and Su Qingya left the Public Security Bureau and saw Zhou Wenbo standing at the door with a worried expression on his face. "It's impossible for you to save the old thing trapped inside. If you don't want to be beaten, just roll back and give me a few words to those beasts who are inferior." Zhou Shuyu's mouth curved to one side with an evil aura. "What? What words?" Zhou Wenbo suppressed his fear and asked. "One is to ask them to refund the dowry of the Li family, the other is to repay the money earned by my younger brother tomorrow morning. The third is that I gave Zhou Hongwei 2 days, and the day after tomorrow, I want to see one of his children send a registration form for going to the countryside. And it's the kind that needs to be stamped. Don't try to deceive me, don't try to procrastinate, otherwise he won't just lose his job. Whether one will be arrested or sent to the farm for further education by going through the back door and deceiving others depends on how the public security determines." Zhou Shuyu spoke word by word very clearly. "In case Zhou Wenbo misses out, he will have to make things unclear again. You're going too far. My cousin already has a job, so he's waiting to become a full-time employee. My cousin is also in a similar situation, and they're getting married in the new year. How can they go to the countryside at this time?" Zhou Wenbo frowned and wanted to discuss with her. But Zhou Shuyu looked at him again, but there was no warmth left. "Why are they living so well while my younger brother is going to suffer? What I'm saying is a notice, not a discussion. Don't forget, you're eating whose rice and spending whose money, growing up so big." Zhou Wenbo was so frightened that he suddenly woke up. Okay. I got it, I'll go talk now." When he ran to Zhou Hongwei's house out of breath, the whole family was still in pain. The door was open for a long time, but before Mrs. Wang came in, Zhou Hongwei's face immediately darkened. "Wenbo, where's your grandmother? I was sent to the Public Security Bureau by Zhou Shuyu. The police said that my milk was not given her consent and that I received an unreasonable high dowry from the Li family. This is a crime, and if it is confirmed, I will be sentenced, Zhou Wenbo said stiffly. What? Several members of the Zhou family were all startled. They never imagined that Zhou Shuyu could be so crazy that he dared to send his grandmother to prison. Zhou Wenbo, facing their almost cannibalistic gaze, recounted in detail the 3 demands made by Zhou Shuyu. Before even a few adults could speak, his cousin flew into a rage. What is Zhou Shuyu? He's just a loser. How dare he be so arrogant and let my sister and I go to the countryside? Look at me not killing her today. Zhou Wenhan shouted fiercely. He rushed into the kitchen and grabbed the coal ball pliers, ready to charge out. Stop. Uncle Zhou sternly called out to him, look at what Wenbo has been beaten up like, and then think about why we were suddenly beaten up today and dare to go and confront him hard. Dad, do you really want to choose between me and my sister and send them to the countryside? Zhou Wenhan asked angrily. Uncle Zhou took out a cigarette from his pocket and lit it. After taking a hard breath, he said, your second uncle died, which drove Zhou Shuyu crazy. If we confront her now, we won't have a good ending. Although she was pinched by a dead girl, her face was completely ruined. But the more it is now, the more we need to remain calm. What should we do now? Who will go to the countryside with my sister? Zhou Wenhan scratched his head irritably. Zhou Weiyun bit her lips tightly and looked at them with red eyes. Why don't I go? Big Brother's job will be confirmed soon, with a monthly salary of 30 yuan, so we can't delay it. She took the initiative to speak. Actually, she doesn't want to go to the countryside at all. You don't have to think about it all. This matter of going to the countryside will definitely fall on her. Although her parents may seem to love her on a regular basis, deep down, they prioritize men over women the most. Instead of crying and refusing to go to the countryside, which offends everyone in the family, it's better to take the initiative to stand up and make the whole family remember her kindness. When we go to the countryside, we can provide more support for her. Sure enough, after Zhou Weiyun finished speaking, the whole family looked at her with contentment and guilt. Weiyun, how could you endure such hardship? Zhou Wenhan's moved voice choked up. We siblings must have someone to endure this hardship. You're my brother. If you stay and take good care of your parents, then no matter how much hardship I endure, it's worth it. Zhou Weiyun spoke very sincerely, tears silently rolling out of her eyes. My poor Cloud. Aunt Zhou cried and hugged her. Uncle Zhou's eyes couldn't help but turn red as he looked at them. You go ahead and stay at ease. I will find someone to send you to the Northeast team. Although it's very cold in winter there, you can do more than 3 months of less agricultural work than other teams. When you arrive there, my family will send you 10 yuan and 5 kilograms of food stamps every month. When everything is over and the people around us no longer stare at us, I will buy you a good job in the city, and then I can offer you a better marriage at your doorstep. He took a big puff of his cigarette before biting his teeth and letting his heart down. Although Uncle Zhou has a preference for his son, after all, his daughter is also flesh and blood. Moreover, Yun is a sensible and well-behaved child who is particularly filial. If it weren't for pleasing the director and wanting to get a promotion, he wouldn't have caused such trouble. Yes, go to Northeast. It's a bit cold over there, but there's a big Kong and a fire wall. I'll find a way to prepare 2 thick cotton quilts and 2 thick cotton clothes for Yun. Don't be too comfortable during the cat winter. Aunt Zhou quickly nodded in agreement, as if afraid that her own man would turn back. For families with conditions to provide subsidies for their children, going to the countryside in the Northeast is the best choice. The daughter of the factory director's family needs to change places because her body is weak and unable to withstand the cold. As for Zhou Shuyang, then he can only blame himself for his misfortune. Who makes the second family poor, cannot provide him with subsidies. Suffering from cold and hunger in the northeast is also his fate. Mom and Dad, thank you for worrying so much about me. Zhou Weiyun looked grateful, tears streaming down her face. Zhou Wenhan, who could stand by, looked at them with a slightly stiff expression. All the previous emotions disappeared when he heard that his father was going to spend so much money. His grandmother and parents have both said that all the money in both families belongs to him and his younger brother. But now I have to spend hundreds, even thousands, on Zhou Weiyun. Why? She's just a loser who wants to marry into someone else's house. Chapter 7. Zhou Wenbo's stealing the rooster and snatching the dog. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Old Zhou, Su Qingya's mother and daughter have caused us so much trouble. Can we just forget about it? Although everything has been arranged, Aunt Zhou still feels unhappy in her heart. Of course I won't let go of that dead girl. Uncle Zhou narrowed his eyes and spoke in a sinister tone. What are you planning to do? The people of the Zhou family's eyes lit up immediately upon hearing these words. Uncle Zhou's gaze swept over them, but in the end, he didn't say anything. Just wait and see, they definitely won't be okay anyway. So we were just beaten, did that dead girl do it? Aunt Zhou rubbed her arm, which was so painful that she couldn't even lift it, and asked with hatred. Is it her? Who has evidence? Do you think so? You can go to the police station to report the case, and you are responsible for any consequences. Uncle Zhou glared fiercely at her. She froze in action and dared not make any more noise. However, after a while, it seemed as if something had come to mind. He looked up and proposed excitedly. Old Zhou, why don't we let Yunyun and Zhou Shuyang join the same team? Anyway, Zhou Shuyu's girl went to the countryside and didn't have a chance to complain to her brother. Zhou Shuyang is also obedient. Let Su Qingya remind him to take care of Yunyun more, and Yunyun's life in the countryside will also be much better, okay? Then we'll do everything you say. He also thinks this idea is quite good. Let that dead girl go crazy these few days, and it won't be long before she cries. The next day, Zhou Shuyu deliberately did not go out and stayed at home, waiting for the old Zhou family to deliver the money while directing Zhou Wenbo to work at home. Uncle Zhou procrastinated and didn't bring the money to his door until after 10 o'clock. All the money you need is here, are you counting correctly? Zhou Hongwei took out a small stack of big unity and placed it on the table. Zhou Shuyu was not polite and picked it up several times. After confirming that it was right, he propped up his chin and lazily looked at Zhou Hongwei. Zhou Hongwei suppressed his disgust and continued, we have decided to send your cousin to the countryside. Here is the registration form. Zhou Shuyu poked his head and carefully looked at the watch. After confirming that there were no issues, I gave him a gesture to chase each guest. Zhou Hongwei forcefully supported his cold face, with cracks appearing. I secretly took a few deep breaths and then took out a stack of big unity from my pocket. This is the 500 yuan dowry given by the Li family, all of which are here. You don't need to give me this money. Of course, you will have to refund the marriage you discussed. Zhou Shuyu wrapped his hands around his chest and didn't touch the money at all. She knew that the people of the old Zhou family could never be honest, and even after retiring, she wanted her to go to the Li family to suffer. Zhou Hongwei still wants to persuade. But those black eyes that saw through everything, the words that deceived him reached his lips, but he couldn't say anything. In the end, I could only put the money back in my pocket. Then I'll leave first. You and your mother should handle your father's affairs properly. If you need any help, just call me and your aunt. Oh, hypocrisy. Zhou Shuyu didn't get used to him at all and directly mocked him. Do they really have the heart to come and cause trouble when her father hasn't passed the 7th grade yet? Zhou Hongwei knew he was saying too much and making too many mistakes, so he pretended not to hear anything and turned around to leave. However, as he walked to the door, he secretly gave Zhou Wenbo a glance while Zhou Shuyu was not paying attention. Zhou Wenbo received the signal and quickly lowered his head, continuing to clean the cabinet honestly as if nothing had happened. After wiping the inside and outside of the 5-bucket cabinet thoroughly, he carried the dirty bucket and walked out. In recent years, the tube-shaped building built in the factory basically shares the toilet and kitchen on the same floor. Zhou Shuyu's family is no exception. But how could she not have seen the small movements between Zhou Wenbo and Zhou Hongwei? Just pretending to be clear and confused, waiting to see the good show of colluding with others. After a while, Zhou Wenbo returned with a bucket of clean water and continued to clean the sofa at home. He wiped while secretly going to see Zhou Shuyu. Confirming that she was not staring at herself, she deliberately pretended to wipe something else and entered Su Qingya's room. Just as he entered, Zhou Shuyu got up and followed him. Pushing open the partially open door, I saw Zhou Wenbo pouting his buttocks in front of the bedside table. "I don't know what I'm doing. Do you want to steal something?" Zhou Shuyu suddenly spoke up, which scared Zhou Wenbo and made him jump up. "Why are you walking without any sound? I almost scared to death by you." Zhou Wenbo pressed his pounding heart, his face turning red. "There's no ghost in my heart, can I be so scared?" Zhou Shuyu asked in reverse. Zhou Wenbo became angry with embarrassment and threw the cloth in his hand onto the ground. "Enough. It was you who asked me to clean inside and out, and now it's me sneaking around again. You're clearly looking down on me and deliberately causing trouble. Don't think that getting angry means you can stop working. I see you're like jumping after grabbing a bag," Zhou Shuyu sneered. Then, without giving Zhou Wenbo a chance to argue, he walked up to him and pulled open the bedside table. There isn't much inside, just the usual sewing and patching needles and thread, as well as the household registration book. "Do you want to steal this?" Zhou Shuyu took out his household registration book and shook it in front of Zhou Wenbo. Zhou Wenbo's expression stiffened slightly, and he immediately retorted in anger and embarrassment. "Don't talk nonsense. What's stealing? This is my house, and I still need to go steal things. The household registration book is well placed there, and I really want to do something with it. It's on me now. Maybe you haven't had a chance to take action yet." Zhou Shuyu doesn't believe his lies at all. "Don't slander me here." Zhou Wenbo roared back in anger. Without waiting for Zhou Shuyu to refute, he picked up the bucket and walked out. "Come back and clean up," Zhou Shuyu stopped. Being on guard is one thing, and having him work is another. Since she's here now, how could she continue to let go? This ungrateful dog, like an old man, eats and drinks at home every day. Zhou Wenbo gritted his teeth in frustration and anger, but dared not refute, afraid of being beaten again, so he had to work hard to clean it up again. With a sarcastic snort, Zhou Shuyu left the room with his household registration book. She should keep such an important thing. In the next few days, neither the Zhou nor Li families came to make a fuss. This freed up a lot of energy for Zhou Shuyu and her daughter to focus on handling the affairs behind Zhou Jianxi. Finding someone to repair the appearance, decorate the funeral hall, and find a teacher to make a coffin all cost compensation from the transportation company. Even if none of the Zhou family came to help, they wouldn't be in a hurry. After all these things were dealt with, Su Qingya knocked on Zhou Shuyu's door with an embarrassed expression on her face. Chapter 8. Registering Zhou Wenbo for going to the countryside. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Shuyu, I have something to discuss with you. Your father is going to be buried tomorrow, and the old neighbors and colleagues who come will see that your uncle and aunt are not coming, and I don't know what unpleasant words will be said behind your back. Besides, no one has come to give a letter about the burial at home. It must be your uncle. If we can't discuss it today, what should we do tomorrow? Su Qingya hung her head, wondering why. Buried in my hometown. She said that the people of the old Zhou family are so quiet these days. I used to be waiting for them here. Then bury it in the suburban cemetery. How can that be done? Su Qingya didn't wait for Zhou Shuyu to finish speaking, and her attitude was rare and tough. If your father can't be buried in his ancestral tomb, he might not be able to close his eyes even under the 9 springs. Zhou Shuyu pursed her lips and asked calmly, Mom, do you know what we have to face if we want to bury Dad in our ancestral tomb? Su Qingya's face stiffened with persistence, and then she began to feel guilty. They should let you go to the police station and release your grandmother. How could it be so simple? Zhou Shuyu suppressed the mockery that surged in his heart, but his voice became even colder. They will also make us apologize in an extremely humiliating way. They will slap me on them and pay me back twice as much. They will have Zhou Wenbo take over my father's job and even force me to marry Li Weiqing again. But you think this is the end? As long as my father's coffin is lying in the ancestral tomb of the Zhou family, we will have to do whatever they want us to do in the future. If they don't listen, they will threaten to move my dad out. Mom, that's it. Do you think my dad can really close his eyes under the 9 springs? Hypotheses hit Su Qingya hard in the heart one by one. Her body shook and she looked almost dizzy. Zhou Shuyu let out a low sigh and said, Mom, we are destined to completely separate ourselves from the old Zhou family. Let's just bury our father in the suburban cemetery. It's not that no one is buried there. And it's close, so we can visit him every year during Qingming Festival, winter solstice, and July 30th. My dad wouldn't be too lonely down there either. Su Qingya's lips, which had lost some blood color, trembled slightly as they opened. When his gaze fell on his own daughter, he tightly pursed into a straight line. Zhou Shuyu didn't urge either, waiting for her to straighten the nerve in her mind. After about a full minute, Su Qingya finally vented her anger. You said your father just died, and we broke off our relationship with the old Zhou family. Can he forgive us? If my dad watches from the sky and we don't do it, he will urge us, Zhou Shuyu said proudly. If her father were really a foolish and filial person, he wouldn't have been stubborn enough to marry her mother in more than 20 years ago. I won't forcefully split up in the future, and I won't be able to discuss withdrawing from the marriage. Okay, then I'll go to the suburban cemetery now and choose a good location for your father. Su Qingya nodded and stood up. Zhou Shuyu wanted to follow and help, but was stopped. You're weak. You've been busy with me in and out these past few days, and you're all exhausted, right? You stay at home and rest well. Let your big brother cook 2 bowls of noodles at noon. Su Qingya looked at her with heartache. Zhou Shuyu wanted to say that her body was pretty good, but she didn't know how to speak up. The original owner really dug a pit for her, deep enough to kill someone. Although she has always been able to bounce around, she deliberately pretended to be uncomfortable from a young age in order to let her family handle everything. Even allowing her younger brother, who is 2 years younger than her, to bear the pressure of the Zhou family and go to the countryside. You should know that Zhou Shuyang dropped out of school because of her, and didn't even finish high school. If someone found out about this one day, she would be so ashamed that she wished she could wear it back to the end of the world. I'll go out and take a look, otherwise I'll feel annoyed when I see Zhou Wenbo at home. When Zhou Shuyu mentioned this name, he unabashedly shrugged his nose in disgust. Su Qingya wanted to advise her not to argue with Zhou Wenbo anymore. After all, he was also a brother who grew up together since childhood. But seeing that Zhou Shuyu was clearly still in a rage, he planned to slow down and persuade him again. Zhou Shuyu took Su Qingya onto the bus and slowly swayed to the Educated Youth Office. Now this half-month happens to be the time for the next batch of educated youth to apply for subsidies. Many people come and go in and out of the office courtyard, but everyone's face is very ugly. After losing their enthusiasm for going to the countryside, everyone knows that the hardship is not something they can bear. And it's almost impossible to go back and regret it. Comrade, hello. May I ask if Zhou Weiyun has registered? Zhou Shuyu walked into the office and politely asked the staff who were organizing the files. The person raised their head and looked at her impatiently. He lowered his head again and continued to busy himself with his work. If you register, you can't cancel it, the other person answered in a different tone. At this time every year, many people come over and make a fuss about tearing up the registration form. But if they were to do it this way, they wouldn't even be able to complete 1/10 of the prescribed tasks. Zhou Weiyun is my cousin. She said she will go to the countryside this year, so I want to confirm it. Please help me. Zhou Shuyu widened her eyes and became particularly innocent. The staff member only pulled open the drawer beside her when she heard her say so. I dug out a stack of registration forms and flipped through them casually. She drew a piece from it and showed it to Zhou Shuyu. She has indeed registered. Zhou Shuyu saw that the brigade registered above was actually the same as Zhou Shuyang, and his relaxed eyebrows twisted tightly in an instant. The person looked at her and thought she was Zhou Weiyun, so he immediately put away the registration form on guard. Zhou Shuyu did not explain, but took out their household registration book from the military green shoulder bag he was carrying. Comrade, I need to trouble you again. My family has asked me to come and help my brother sign up for going to the countryside. She placed her household registration book in front of the other party. The staff member who was originally a bit angry immediately improved their mood. She didn't even ask, so she just flipped through her household registration book. There are too many people who have signed up for their families behind their backs these days. They have seen no strange things for a long time. Anyway, as long as they have a household registration book, they will follow the rules and no one can make a mistake. Zhou Wenbo, the staff asked with confirmation. Yes. Zhou Shuyu nodded. The other party took a new registration form and registered according to the information in their household registration book. After putting all the seals on them, he curiously asked, "You only have 3 children in your family. Last year, your younger brother signed up to go to the countryside. Why did you and your older brother sign up again this year?" Chapter 9. Going to the countryside alone is not too cheap for him. You are listening at novelfull.audio. When did I register my name? Zhou Shuyu was shocked. Since the last time I caught Zhou Wenbo sneaking around, this household registration has been kept in the space. Unless their household registration had already been stolen before she came to this world. Zhou Wenbo just put back his household registration book last time. The day before yesterday, I registered on the same day as Zhou Weiyun, the staff said. Ha! It seems that the people of the old Zhou family really hate and poison her. Since there's nothing we can do about her, let's just send her away. So leave her mother who is not very able to stand up and hold her to death. Zhou Shuyu sneered sarcastically. Although there were no further actions, it still made the staff feel a chill in their spine. She straightened her body, wary of the little girl in front of her causing trouble. But Zhou Shuyu suddenly changed his expression and obediently looked at her. Comrades, could you please put Zhou Weiyun and me in the same team, and my younger brother is also there. We used to have some mutual support. The staff originally intended to refuse. After all, which team to go to is randomly assigned. It is not explicitly allowed to specify where to transfer. Otherwise, you can choose, I can choose. They don't know how much more workload they need to increase. And the brigade in the northeast is willing to go as long as their family conditions are good. But seeing that they had completed 4 targets for the Educated Youth Office, the staff still agreed. Watching the staff write on their registration form that they are from the same team as Zhou Shuyang. Zhou Shuyu's lips curved into a cheerful smile. Can I trouble you again to help my older brother assign the team to the northwest side? She asked in a pleading tone. The staff were completely shocked now. Zhou Shuyu quickly explained, actually, it's not that I want to be picky, it's just that my brother's relationship with everyone is very poor. I'm afraid that if we arrange to get together and argue all day long, we won't be able to fully devote ourselves to building a new countryside. When the time comes, we will not only smear our educated youth, but also make our fellow villagers despise us, the educated youth sent from the city. Your relationship with your family may not be much better. The staff roast in their hearts. However, Zhou Shuyu didn't make too much fuss when he came to register his name. She fell into a relaxed state. I'm in a good mood, so let's just give her a try. Okay, the Northwest is the Northwest. Quickly write a Northwest Brigade on Zhou Wenbo's registration form. She collected all the registration forms and put them in the nearby drawer. Thank you very much for helping so much today. Zhou Shuyu took out a few big white rabbit milk candies from his pocket and stuffed them into the hands of the staff. This candy was given to her by her old neighbor a few days ago when her father passed away. It's okay, your family is full of positive thinking young people. If we can help with this matter, we are still willing to help. The staff smiled and accepted her candy. Zhou Shuyu's delicate face immediately stiffened as she left the educated youth office. The people of the old Zhou family probably planned to make their family know nothing. When the day was approaching the train, the educated youth office came to arrest them. Even if her mother wanted to change jobs, she wouldn't have time. By then, her father's job would naturally fall on Zhou Wenbo. Unfortunately, human calculation is not as good as natural calculation. They would never have thought that they would come to help Zhou Wenbo register for going to the countryside. But now, does she choose to stay in the city to work or go to northeast China to check in and visit the foolish younger brother of the original owner in the countryside? Zhou Shuyu didn't think much and ultimately chose the latter. Since she used the original owner's body, let's do something for the original owner as a reward. After making the decision, Zhou Shuyu glanced at the direction of the Public Security Bureau again and forcefully suppressed the idea of reporting to the police now. Her father is going to the funeral tomorrow, and now her mother is just holding her breath. If she knew about her plan to go to the countryside, she would definitely not be able to withstand the stimulation and go to the hospital. When the time comes, she will have a three-headed fever alone, not only dealing with funeral matters, but also dealing with the people of the old Zhou family and transportation team, so she won't be able to get busy at all. Anyway, it's just 2 days late, and what should go in is ultimately going to have to go in. But suddenly knowing that we are going to the countryside, we need to prepare things quickly. Although the transportation team said they will finalize the compensation plan and amount as soon as possible. But decades later, this kind of thing cannot be resolved without delaying for more than half a year. People nowadays are efficient in handling tasks, but it still takes 2 to 3 months. The thing she went to the countryside must not have waited that long. So she still has to find a way to earn this money on her own. Looking at the space of only 1,000 cubic meters, Zhou Shuyu frowned with a headache. This place is not small, but there are piles of things, it's really exhausting to squeeze in. She simply went to find a public restroom. As soon as she stepped into the dimly damp long-row bungalow, the foul smell almost made her faint. The current toilet is a type of long row of pools that are flushed at fixed times. Today is a workday, so the time interval for flushing is even longer. Zhou Shuyu waved his hand and drove away the fly that flew to his face. Suppressing nausea, I checked all the toilets. After confirming that there is no one, quickly take out cosmetics and wigs from the space. This thing is an important equipment for her apocalypse. Otherwise, if you stumble on others and get caught, you may not know how to secretly plan and seek revenge in the future. First, I made myself a flat garlic nose with skin wax, and then raised some cheekbones and cheeks. She also used 2 black foundation make dot up to color the exposed skin. I didn't even let go behind my ears. Finally, 2 black flesh moles and some freckles were added to the nose and eyes before leaving the restroom. At this time, there are still several years left before release, and the black market is tightly controlled, making it difficult to find. She can only squat at the hospital entrance first. There were many people coming in and out, but she crouched down to the point where her legs were numb, only to see an old lady hurriedly walking out with an obviously lightweight basket in her hand. Zhou Shuyu quickly followed up. I didn't dare to follow closely all the way, as long as I could see my back from afar. The person walked for almost an hour before reaching an alley entrance. A flowing young man, smoking a cigarette, raised his chin at her. She immediately put her hand in that person's hand and then entered the alley. Zhou Shuyu did not immediately follow, but waited for a full 10 minutes. After seeing people coming in and going out with things in their hands, they quickly walked over. Chapter 10. Going to the black market to catch quick money. You are listening at novelfull.audio. She walked over to the young man and stopped, glanced at him and quickly lowered her head. In or out? The young man asked. Enter. 2 points. Zhou Shuyu quickly took out 2 pennies from his pocket, handed them to the other person, and hurriedly walked into the alley. The alley is not very long, but it is crisscrossed with many places to sell things. Although there are many people inside, they are all very quiet. Along with it, Zhou Shuyu breathed lightly. She walked around the alley, asked about prices, and then looked at other people's things. Finally, he squatted down in front of an old man selling bamboo baskets. Grandpa, how do you sell this largest basket? 15 cents, the old man whispered. So expensive. Zhou Shuyu touched his pocket in pain. Not expensive, this basket needs to be woven for at least 5 or 6 hours, the old man quickly explained. Cheng. Zhou Shuyu took out 1.5 cents from his pocket and paid the old man. Take the bamboo basket, say thank you, and then get up and leave. I spent another 80 cents to buy a scale, and 20 cents to buy 4 different sizes of burlap bags. It can hold 200 pounds, 100 pounds, 50 pounds, and 10 pounds of rice respectively. After all these preparations are completed, Zhou Shuyu only has 23 cents left in his pocket. After leaving the black market, she turned around for a while. Find an empty alley and take out everything in the space. She has been here for 5 days, but the supplies in the space are updated at midnight every day, so there are only 4 now. And if you want to update the supplies in the space, you must put everything outside at 11.59 every night. Only after 0 will a new one emerge. There are 4 chickens and 8 ducks, 8 fish, and 8 pounds each of lean meat, pork belly, pork ribs, lamb, and beef. She only packed 50 pounds and 10 pounds of rice. The remaining 20 pounds, when sold out, will be secretly replenished. The reason for running out so troublesome is because I'm afraid someone will pay attention to the black market. When she went in, she didn't take anything, but suddenly something was sold, afraid it could be mistaken for a monster. Zhou Shuyu returned to the alley of the black market, and the young smokers were stunned when they saw her. Why are you here again? I'm here to sell things this time, Zhou Shuyu whispered. The person didn't ask any further, and after receiving 5 cents, he let her in. Zhou Shuyu found a relatively crowded place. After placing the basket on the ground, place the pork belly on the lid of the basket. As soon as the meat was released, it immediately attracted many people to surround it. Girl, how do you sell this meat? Such a big basket, there must be more than just this piece of pork belly. What else do you have? Although they were all trying hard to keep their voices down, every word they said still made Zhou Shuyu's stall seem particularly lively. Wuhua roe weighs 851 pounds, and I also have pork ribs, lean meat, chicken, duck, fish, lamb, beef, and special polished rice. Zhou Shuyu looked up and scanned the people around him before saying. When they heard about lamb and beef, those people were clearly excited. It's impossible to buy these 2 types of meat on a regular basis, and if you want to eat them again, it depends on your fate. However, when they heard Zhou Shuyu mention the special supply of refined rice, they all understood again. The girl in front of me looks ordinary, but she must have her own good connections. Girl, please show us. There are too many people, it looks messy when taken out. If you want to buy anything, I will take it for you. Zhou Shuyu refused. I want 2 pounds of pork belly. I want a fish, 10 pounds of rice. Fish costs 41 cents per kilogram, and rice costs 221 cents per kilogram. The person who wanted to buy rice stopped immediately upon hearing this. 22 cents, this is too expensive. You can make it cheaper, it's 18 cents. Zhou Shuyu frowned and said, this ordinary polished rice only costs 22 cents. I still have it for special supply, and even if you have money, you won't be able to get it. I don't want to argue with you, that's why the price is so low. Forget it, I'll show you, and you'll know if it's worth it. She reached into the basket and grabbed a handful of rice. First, he spread out his palm and showed everyone a glance. Then I gave some to a few people who wanted to buy. Her rice is not only plump and plump, but also much whiter than the refined rice circulating on the market today. 22 cents, they definitely made a profit by buying it. If it weren't for fishing, she would never have sold the rice and beef and mutton. It's too eye-catching. I want 20 pounds. Weigh me 10 pounds. Those people rushed to report what they wanted to buy. Rice and pork are the fastest sellers, sold out in almost 2 minutes. The remaining chickens and ducks, although those people also wanted to buy them, were somewhat disdainful. Daughter, where are your chicken and duck feathers? We're still hoping to exchange a few candies for our children by the end of the year. Yeah, you little girl is also too good at living. She just wants to pick out a few candies from us. Can chicken feathers be exchanged for sugar? Zhou Shuyu was somewhat surprised. But seeing everyone say so, there is no doubt. But these things were all packed up by her in the apocalypse. At that time, if you had a meal, you would always fight and run away, and of course, you had to handle the food well. Now asking her for chicken feathers and duck feathers, she can't change it either. Sorry, Auntie, this hair is stained with blood. I'm afraid it might dirty other things, so I'll handle it myself. But although my chicken and duck have no feathers, the price is very reasonable. They pay 50 cents per kilogram and also charge tickets. You see, I'm only selling 50 cents and I don't want anything from you anymore, right? Zhou Shuyu smiled exceptionally warmly, with a hint of simplicity. Although those people were a bit unwilling, thinking that she was right, they didn't persist anymore. But surrounded by so many people, it's not possible to sell in a different place. She can only use a little force on her fingertips during weighing to make each weight different. Those people also brought scales and found that she had miscalculated 1 or 2 taels. This is equivalent to letting them earn 50 cents for nothing, so no one spoke up and quickly paid before leaving. Zhou Shuyu spent almost 20 minutes selling all the remaining items. The total weight of rice is 80 pounds, and it was sold for 17.6 yuan. All the meat added up and sold for 49 yuan and 76 cents. That is to say, it took her 5 days to gather 67.36 yuan worth of things. It's really difficult to earn money these days. Zhou Shuyu couldn't help but sigh. No matter how hard it is to earn money, you still have to spend it.